Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, August 4th, 2026, and our dear friend, Colonel Wilkerson, is here with us. Welcome back, Colonel.
Good to be with you, Nima, as usual.
Let me start with what's going on between Saudi Arabia and Yemen. Just an hour ago, we've learned that Yemen struck Saudi Arabia airport. One of the airports there is sensitive targets were hit. We don't know what was that target so far, but we know that they're claiming that they hit sensitive targets there. And another important thing that has happened with the case of Saudi Arabia is an Indian flag tanker carried oil from Saudi Arabia was blown up with Yemeni suicide boat. And this is what's going on between Saudi Arabia and Yemen. The other point is today is Arba'in, as I've mentioned before coming to this live, is the 40th day after the martyrdom of Imam Hussein in Shia Muslim. And we know that Iran and Iraq are commemorating the 40th day. And today and tomorrow, by tomorrow night, maybe Iraq gonna attack Saudi Arabia. And today I've learned from Professor Marandi that the Saudi Arabia they have sent messages, or they talk with Iranians telling them that they didn't attack Iraq. It was the United States attacking Iraq. This is the complexity of the issue and the way you see they were bragging about the attack on Iran, and right now they're saying, hey, we didn't do that. It was the United States doing this. What is, Larry, your understanding of what's going on with the case of Saudi Arabia, which is so important for their economy because they're under tremendous pressure right now from the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea?
I would not want to be in Mohammed bin Salman's shoes right now because he's caught by a number of different pressures. He's trapped. And I think, like Trump, and I don't compare MBS to Trump. I think MBS is fairly smart, but he's caught in these different pressures. He's got the pressure of Trump and the nuclear program and the Abraham Accords and the Palestinians on the one hand. He's also got the pressure of direct pressure of what the Houthis are doing to him and probably going to do more of to him in the next few weeks. And then he's got the pressure of the overall picture. Now, I know that the Saudis now, I was checking yesterday, I don't think they hold much more than a few percent of our sovereign debt right now. But they also have that and the relationship with the empire to be concerned about, because I think there's at least a growing recognition on their part that the empire is going to be driven out of Southwest Asia. I think that's one reason MBS has done some of the preliminary things he's done. He's trying to give us a handhold, if you will, and that's what the nuclear agreement was all about too. He got what he wanted, but we got what we wanted too. And what he wanted was not just the nuclear agreement, but something to anchor the empire to Riyadh, because that anchor, if you will, is rapidly going away. And he sees us being kicked out. If we are going to be kicked out, he does not want it to include his country, at least not until the nuclear deal's complete and so forth. And maybe he's probed some other options. But I think he's in a real trick bag right now. And he's been put there by Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu. Now, let me hasten to add, I have a little bit more intelligence even now on how the Netanyahu-Trump meetings went, and the overall impression I have now, and I think it's pretty solid, is it was terrible. It didn't go well at all. Bibi deployed something, and Trump was angered by it, not impressed or cowed by it. I don't know if it was Epstein or what, but Bibi did try to deploy something. And what happened was Trump essentially just said, that'll damage you as much as me. Therefore, I don't fear that at all. What else you got in your bag? Or something like that. And he was right, because if you think about it, if it were some of the things that I think might have been deployed by Bibi rather haphazardly, including Epstein, it could boomerang on Bibi just as badly as Trump, if at all on Trump, given his precarious political position in Israel right now. So I'm not quite sure where we are in that relationship right now, which I think is very important, because if we're going to go on with the insanity that we're now displaying and have displayed ever since 28 February, if we're going to go on and deepen that insanity, then we are going to have a major assault on Israel, and it's going to be state ending, I think. At least the Jewish portion of the state is going to be done, because Iran's going to wreak havoc from one end of Israel to the other. And it's going to take a lot of U.S. assets out, too, which is why Kat said what he said: get your planes out of here. You're a target-rich environment. Get them out of here. And Bibi had to countermand him. But what Bibi didn't countermand, that Trump also got angry in the meeting about, is the fact that he's not going to comply with anything with Trump's beautiful humanitarian future for the Palestinians, Gaza, and so forth. He's not going to comply with any of it. And he's proven it right now by killing people even more than he was before who are in Gaza, whether it's Hamas or just innocent civilians. And he's picked up the pace on the West Bank. And I think he's getting ready to move even more dramatically in Lebanon. And so he's doing nothing that Trump probably pressed him to do in that meeting. And Bibi maybe agreed that he would do it, and then write home and countermanded all of that. And one of the things that's significant here, I think probably one of the most significant things that's happening in Gaza right now, and maybe in Israel itself, is that he is not going to accept any of the conditions that we have put on him for the international force, such as it might be, to be deployed, or for anything to happen in Gaza with regard to this humanitarian whatever future organization, because he's not going to accept the parameters expressed, nor is Hamas. And Hamas has not categorically agreed to this. That's true. The disarmament of Hamas. And who's going to be the force in Gaza post that, even if it happens? So this is a mess. It's a complete mess inside Israel, with all the promises he apparently made to Trump that he's not going to keep, and with all the things he's going to do that are going to incite Iran, and the fact that he's in trouble politically so badly that I think he would do just about anything to get the United States significantly involved with him in another attack on Iran, a combined attack on Iran. So we're looking at a development, and then, as you and I were talking about before we went on the air, you've got this CNN release about, or story about, Bradley Cooper, the admiral in charge of Central Command, the command responsible for this war, being so lost that he's pulsing through his intelligence community his own forces for ideas. A request went out, apparently, if you're to believe this story, from the commander, Bradley Cooper. It went out to his command: I need some ideas. We're not winning this thing. I need some ideas. So that shows you the frustration of the military. On top of that, I'm hearing that the commander-in-chief, the SACEUR, he wears two hats, the U.S. commander, and the Supreme Allied Commander for Europe, NATO commander, Air Force General Alexis Grinkowicz. I'm hearing he's really putting some ointment on the fire in the Mediterranean, not just with regard to naval forces, most of which, if not all of which, belong to him, Sixth Fleet, Standing Naval Force NATO, and so forth. And they're being asked to defend Israel when this thing comes together and Israel gets under really horrendous attack from Iran. And he's saying, rightfully so, I can't do that and support my own war plans. And you've got other commanders-in-chief around, they don't call them sinks anymore, they call them combatant commanders around the world. Outside of EUCOM, you got AFRICOM and you got INDOPACOM, of course, who are saying similar things to Kane about their munitions being bled down to the point where they can't fulfill their war plans. So you have major contention, finally, in the Pentagon amongst some fairly high-level commanders. And I don't think Hegseth has a clue what to do about it. Kane knows that he's got a problem with munitions and got a problem with these commanders. But this discord in the American military and the idea that Bradley Cooper is asking his people for ideas tells you how distraught we are and how unsuccessful we are in this conflict. And we will continue to be unsuccessful. On top of that, you've got the president making remarks that are unconscionable. Again, talking about bringing terror through bombs and so forth. I mean, you can't corral Trump, apparently, even if you have some inclination to do so and you have some reason to do so, you can't. He just goes out and says these things. And most of it that he's saying about diplomacy here, diplomacy there, the Iranians are caving, they want to talk again, they're all lies. They're bald-faced lies that he's making up either out of whole cloth or grabbing from Laura Loomer or someone else. He's not helping himself at all in terms of the actual problem he's got, which is still the same problem. It's still the Strait of Hormuz. It's still the nuclear program. It's still the ballistic missiles. It's all those things that he said he was starting this thing for in the first place, and nothing, zero, has been achieved. And in fact, in many cases, like with the Strait of Hormuz, it has backfired on him big time. So we're sitting here with a president who has no idea how to get out of the mess that he's in and continues to lie regularly about it in terms of diplomacy going on and in terms of military action going on, because he knows no other thing to do. Now, I would submit to you that we cannot lie our way through the commander-in-chief out of this conflict. And so we're in a real mess right now, probably a deeper mess than even I thought we would eventually get into.
Laurie, in the article that you mentioned on CNN, he says that we're looking for a new creative and unconventional ways to pressure and punish Iran. And what comes to your mind when it comes to the unconventional ways? What does that mean to you?
It could mean any number of things, including using ground forces in a selective way, including going after Carg Island, for example. It could mean any number of things. It could also mean using nuclear weapons. I hope not, but it could. But it shows you the desperation of Bradley Cooper, even if this is a true story, and it rings true to me, but it shows you the desperation. What can we do? Nothing that we have done that we've been authorized to do, or maybe the things we've done that we haven't been authorized to do, I've been there before, has worked. And it doesn't appear that it's going to work. So we can keep dropping bombs all day long until we run out of bombs, but it's not going to break Iran's will. So what can we do? I would think this is the ultimate sign of desperation. If this story is true, that a four-star commander is going out to his command to seek ideas about how to take this conflict and turn it around, make it a positive result rather than the negative results we now have brewing, is unbelievable. It's happening apparently. I don't think CNN made it up, but it is unbelievable. It's incredible, in other words. And it shows the desperation of this administration, its military arm, including Hegseth, and its civilian arm. They simply don't know what to do. They started this war. They're pursuing this war with the only way that the military seems to have at its disposal, which is mostly bombs and other things like that, blowing up on Iranian territory. They thought the regime would collapse. Bibi told them the regime would collapse. Bibi's in deep trouble now, politically and militarily, and nothing's working. I would not want to be in this administration's shoes by any stretch of the imagination. They have screwed everything. Everything that they've touched since 28 February, they have screwed it up.
when they're talking about the ground invasion, Larry, yesterday we've learned that Iranian special ground forces, they have implemented, carried out something like more than 14 operations on Iraqi soil in Iraqi Kurdistan. It means that the fight on the ground has happened or is happening as we talk. That's why you see Iranian attacks on Iraqi Kurdistan and in that areas. It wasn't inside Iran, it was outside of Iran. In Iraq, it's somehow Iran is preemptive the attack, is going preemptive on any sort of possibility of the ground invasion from that border.
Well, what I'd been hearing was that they were trying to get the Peshmerga and other associated forces in northern Iraq to participate, and I heard they failed completely. The Peshmerga have been stooges for the United States before, and I think it would be extremely difficult given the situation that they're now experiencing in northern Iraq, which is not a bad experience. I mean, you could say in some ways the most successful part of Iraq is that portion, and some of the reason is because of the Kurdish leadership figuring things out and cooperating a little bit better and so forth. So I don't think you're going to talk them into conducting military operations inside Iran. So my question would be, what are you doing? Are you trying to mount military operations from Kurdistan into Iran under the guise of it being Peshmerga or under the guise of it being Kurdistan forces? I don't see how that could work. And I return to my original point. They've been fooled so many times by the United States. I go all the way back to Operation Provide Comfort, for example. We've screwed them so many times when we asked them to help us or to do things with us. That I wouldn't fall for our tricks anymore. I simply wouldn't. So I don't know what they're talking about doing out of Kurdistan unless we're talking about using our forces out of Kurdistan to do something to try and disrupt Iran. I don't think that would work. I really don't. And I'm wondering how the Turks feel about this, because the Turks had come to a fairly good accommodation with the forces that they were always having to send troops down in to regulate every now and then in Kurdistan, because the Turks have a real interest, a significant interest, not only in what's happening in southeast Turkey, but also what's happening in Iran, Syria, and Iraq. And they had seemingly settled their problems. They haven't put any troops in there that I'm aware of significance in a long time in Iraq. So this would be stirring that up again. And I don't think they'd be happy about that either. And I'm still waiting. As Doug McGregor says it's going to happen, for Turkey to enter this fray in some way and to throw its weight in somewhere. I'll be very interested to see what the Turks do if Netanyahu really goes whole hog in Lebanon again. He's still got Hezbollah to deal with, and Hezbollah is a viable front. I suspect they're resupplied fairly well now. If you think about that railroad coming into Iran from the west or the east into Tehran, and you think about the Caspian link, I'm pretty sure some of those supplies have gotten to Hezbollah. So they're ready to go again too. And if Hezbollah joins with Iran in this attack that may be coming on Israel, it's going to be hell to pay for Israel.
I think in the case of Israel, it doesn't matter if you have Benjamin Netanyahu or maybe Naftali Bennett coming. Naftali Bennett said he feels that Qatar is worse than Iran because Qatar is somehow playing with the United States, trying to say we are not the enemy, but they're the enemy of Israel, he said.
You wonder how much of that is political rhetoric, because he wants to replace Netanyahu. But I suspect it's genuine. I don't know Bennett that well, but I suspect there are some, let's put it this way, there are some in the Likud in particular, but in the smaller parties that compose the coalition, who don't like Qatar at all. And they're probably right. I mean, when you parse it closely, they're probably right. But some of that's Netanyahu's fault because he was using Qatar to funnel money to Hamas in order to support Hamas over the Palestinian Authority, because Hamas was against a two-state solution and the Palestinian Authority was for it. So he didn't like the Palestinian Authority, and he wanted to indirectly use Hamas to keep them from being triumphant. And he was fairly successful with that, only the blowback on October the 7th was significant. If you believe Netanyahu didn't know it was coming, and if you believe Netanyahu didn't let it come. Now, there's a school of thought amongst people more expert in the region than I that Netanyahu knew all about it and used it like 9/11 and the way we use 9/11 in America to respond with military force, sanctions, and everything else. It gave the neoconservatives an excuse to implement the clean break strategy, in other words, of which we're seeing the last chapter right now. The last chapter was overthrow of the regime in Iran and ensuring Israel's security and perpetuity, and also ensuring greater Israel. These strategies are all mixed up now. They're all, to a certain extent, confounded, but enough of them have come true, both ours after 9/11, the global war on terror, if you will, and this business with Iran now. This latest chapter is not expressly out of the clean break strategy, and I don't think any of the neoconservatives would have thought Donald Trump would be their rescuer in that regard, but he has been. He is. He's the one who's going after regime change with bombs, bullets, and bayonets.
The situation, Larry, is desperate for Donald Trump. You can understand it from latest comments on Chevron and Exxon. He said that these people are making a lot of money and they're not sharing that because of the shortages, because of what's going on with the Strait of Hormuz. When he goes against Exxon and Chevron, there is something big going on.
Yeah, those are two of his biggest supporters. Yeah. And I just watched, I don't know if you've seen the documentary that Abby Martin and some others did on climate change and the climate crisis, and the biggest contributor there too. She's absolutely right in this documentary. I mean, the American military is like something like the 54th state, right, with Portugal on the list of fossil fuel consumers or whatever. And when you look at ExxonMobil is in both. I divide the two states that make up America and the empire now into the national security state. Most people know about that. Most people have read something about that. It came about after World War II. The national security state's entire desire is summed up in Lockheed Martin, RTX, and the other death merchants, and all the money being made off of that. But there's also the predatory capitalist state. And Nancy McLean down at UNC Chapel Hill has written about this in her book, Democracy in Chains. Charles Koch sort of started that. So you have these two states that exist in the empire right now. The national security state is consuming tons of money, and the predatory capitalist state is helping it and fueling it, as it were. So you have companies like ExxonMobil that are in both states, because it is a predatory capitalist enterprise par excellence. And at the same time, its biggest customer is DOD. It sells more to DOD than it does to anybody else in the world. Thus, DOD is one of the highest polluters in the world. This is what this documentary is all about. Graphic scenes in there where they tell you that one B-52 consumes as much as millions of Americans driving on the highway, those sorts of things. At the same time, you have Lockheed Martin, for example, and all of those death merchants. They're in the national security state, but they're also in the predatory capitalist state because of the money they're making. So you have these two states sometimes in combat with one another, but now you have them more often than not in synergy with one another. And they're destroying the United States of America. And Trump hasn't a clue about any of this, but many of them know what he's doing, like what he's doing, and are his biggest supporters. How do you get out of this? I mean, how do you get it? You're captured by both of these states, and Trump is on top of it, fueling both of them. And both of them are going to kill us all, Nima. They're going to kill us all with the climate crisis.
So the reason that I talk about these two companies is because of what would be the solution, Larry, for Donald Trump. As we've mentioned, in Iraq, as time goes by, and the fight is going on that front, but it doesn't seem that it's going well for Donald Trump. And because of the latest decision on his part to remove some of these Patriot systems in Iraq, it seems that they're somehow abandoning Iraq. And do you see the moment that they abandon, they leave, they remove all of these air defense systems, maybe weapons from Iraq?
Nima, I think we abandoned Iraq some time ago. We have acted like we wanted to keep a good relationship and maybe have a few forces there, and we gave reason for it and such. But I think we abandoned Iraq about the time Obama left. And ever since, we have been very, very desultory in our attitude about Baghdad, and in particular because the Shia militias were never done much about by Baghdad. And we saw them there, and we saw Iran's influence there. And as we gained this visceral hatred for Iran, and as we understood what was happening in the Gulf region by our own hand, having gotten rid of Saddam Hussein, and that was not replaced by, as many people said it would be, an Iraqi government that still found the Persians anathema and wouldn't deal with them. Instead, a government that wanted to at least get along with them and wanted at least to have an economic relationship with them and maybe a religious relationship and such. We didn't like that. We didn't like that. So we've been at odds with Iraq in many different ways ever since. They just didn't have the oomph to tell us to leave and get out. They would have loved to have done that. It was hinted at several times. And I thought at one point there we were going to have an agreement and get out, but we never would. And it became increasingly because of Iran, not because of our desire to defend Iraq. And they know that. They know that. So I wouldn't be surprised, Nima, at any given day that half the population, if not more, of Iraq would like to fight us and kill us as much as they would anybody else in the world. But they just don't have the wherewithal. But they don't like us being there. They don't want us there. And if we would leave, they would say bye-bye and good luck or bad luck. So it's at best a difficult relationship, and at worst an inimical relationship. And another reason why I think this is it for the empire in Southwest Asia. I don't think anyone wants us there at all, period. Not even the states that might say they do, that had Al Udeid, for example, and paid all our fuel costs and everything else, because they see what we brought to them. They can't be halfway eyes open and not see what we've brought for them. And what we've brought for them is increasingly their destruction. How can you like that?
Reuters reported that the United States has virtually, they have used virtually all of its long-range ground-to-ground missiles, such as ATACMS, PRSMs, precision SMs. And according to, the new report that came out today on Reuters, and United States was attacking Iran in the western part of Iran using HIMARS. Basically, ATACMS and PRSMs were used to hit the targets in the western part of Iran from Kuwait. And then Iranian response on Kuwait and retaliation on Kuwait. And two important elements. One of them are these ground-to-ground missiles, and the other one are the cruise missiles or Tomahawk missiles.
Right.
And there are no, positive reports on the two. And how is that going to bring a military solution for Donald Trump? I would say in the latest comment he made, it was something so strange. It's because military terror. And does that mean he's gonna consider a nuclear bomb? Because he's running short of these missiles, which are important.
It's more of a complex situation than you might think, at least from what I'm hearing. We also have an enormous drain in Ukraine because we are still sending things there. We are still putting munitions into Ukraine. So we have this very prominent drain into Ukraine and into Israel and into the conflict with Iran. And that drain is bringing all the stocks down significantly across the globe. So as I indicated before, you've got General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, having to deal with these other combatant commanders who are becoming very vocal about this happening. At the same time, you've got Secretary Hegseth, who apparently, I know he's being told this. I have it on really good authority that he's being told this, but he doesn't seem to want to do anything that violates his sycophancy, if you will, with Donald Trump. So you don't have anything from the Secretary of Defense, War, whatever you want to call him. You don't have anything from him in this argument other than Kane telling him, and I guess being stymied at that point. I don't know if Kane has used his power to go directly to the president. Were I he and I felt the way I'm hearing he feels, I would do that. I don't know that it would do any good. It might get him fired. Maybe that's the reason he doesn't do it. But someone needs to tell the commander in chief several very significant realities. One, Ukraine is going down big time. And the way it goes down and the depth of the defeat is going to be inimical to NATO for some time to come, and probably ultimately to Washington. We are draining munitions in a war in that theater that cannot possibly be won. And the more we drain those munitions, the more the other side is determining that we are the enemy, not Zelensky. Zelensky's just a tool. I'm not so sure they haven't already determined that. If you heard that speech that Putin gave recently and that the Duma sort of, expressed their desire for him to keep going, you understand how solid the front is in Russia, despite the absolute piss poor reporting by the American media, including the New York Times, about the condition of Russia. Russia is in excellent shape right now in all categories of thought, really, about this theater. The problem we have is that this might and has every possibility of expanding. And we could see even this entire front that we've developed from the Arctic to Chabahar suddenly merge into a really serious regional conflict and probably ultimately a global conflict. And all of this is because Donald Trump doesn't know what to do about either theater that's prominent, Ukraine or Southwest Asia. He's losing badly in Southwest Asia. He's lying about diplomacy. He lies every day about diplomacy. There is no diplomacy going on. Zero, none whatsoever. Not with the Omanis, not with the Pakistanis, certainly not with the Iranians. Nothing going on. He's lying about that. And at the same time, he's not doing anything about this conflict in Ukraine except deepening it and making it more profound, and more likely that Russia will determine we are an internal enemy as a result of that. And God knows what kind of repercussions that might have, especially if this incompetent president, Donald Trump, gets involved in that again. and he's not going to get involved to bring peace to it like he said he was originally. So we're merging these theaters in many respects and creating all kinds of little conflicts in the midst of them and urging really that they expand. And as you just hinted at, there is a possibility that in one or more of these theaters, we might see a nuclear weapon used. And then we're off to the races. I mean, we've got a really dangerous situation. I just listened to Glenn Dyson and the German general. You've probably heard him before too. Kujat. He was head of the German forces, and then he was he was very high in NATO too. And he gave to Glenn Dyson, he gave an absolutely, in my view, it jives with everything I knew when I was in the government, and I was close to it when I was in the government. He gave a brilliant recap of what happened from George H.W. Bush on to the future and the present, and how we screwed Russia left and right at every opportunity. And we did it increasingly using the situation in Ukraine, which Russia almost desperately tried to keep from happening, trying to protect the Russian population, trying not to go to war. And yet we kept egging it on, egging it on. Merkel was right when she said essentially all we did in 2014, all we did was just buy time to rearm Ukraine. He gave a tremendous presentation on that. He's right. He's absolutely right. So we have an empire right now, and it's led by a fool. It's led by an abject fool. But that empire has been at it since the first year of Bill Clinton's first term, trying to defeat Russia any way it possibly can, and discovering the proxy of Ukraine very early, and using it. And at the same time, trying to give Israel the excuse it needed to finish off the clean break strategy. That is to say, take out Iran, regime change in Iran. That's our whole strategy since Bill Clinton's first term. And it has failed abjectly. And we're now eating, confronting, dealing with that failure. And we haven't a clue what to do. And it's tragic because we're going to put the world at war. We're going to put the world at war.
Yeah. Actually, they're cooperating with Ukrainians right now because we've learned the Ukrainian Reuters reported that Ukrainian missile manufacturer Firepoint, they are making a new agreement with 13 European defense companies to produce a new interceptor or a ballistic missile, which is a interceptor for their air defense system. They say that this interceptor costs under €1 million each, which would be less than significantly cheaper than the Patriot system. And
if it even works 5% of the time, it's probably better than the Patriot system. I mean, this is the biggest pig in a poke that any American defense contractor has ever thrown on the world. We've given this to almost all of our allies. We were going to give it to Zelensky. I understand that's off now. But I mean, Ted Postol's right. I don't think it's as low as 4%, but I do think it's around 20%. And you spent billions of dollars on this, just like you spent billions of dollars on the F-35, and it has a 27% OR rate. I mean, we're not only dissembling lying sacks of proverbial horse manure, we're crooks. We're crooks. Our companies are crooks. I may change my mind about that section that the Senate is looking at in the NDAA, sharing all this with Israel. Yeah, we'll share it with you, Israel. You're going to pay top dollar. We'll share it. It doesn't work. I don't know. I'm criticizing things I'm not an expert in, but I believe Ted Postal is right about Patriot, and I've seen some of the results. And I think I told you I had a conversation with Bill Perry in his office with my Marine Corps War College seminar. Engineer, the only engineer ever to be Secretary of Defense. And he had a very, very good spiel he gave us. He said, never in the history of air defense and of things that come at you through the air and that you want to defend against have we been able to achieve more than 0.21 kill ratio. Never, because it's just the nature of the geometry and the arithmetic and the different environments. He said any engineer knows you're never going to achieve more than 1 out of 4. And is that worth billions of dollars? Wouldn't it be better to go after some other kind of system, like maybe airplanes or whatever? Anyway, you're going to spend these billions of dollars on something like Iron Dome, and it isn't going to work. It isn't going to work to the point where it justifies the money you've spent on it. And that's why, and this is one thing that Kujat pointed out in his spiel to Glenn Dyson, the ABM treaty was so important. It was so important. And when George W. Bush, my president, abrogated that treaty, that was a failure of the first magnitude, because that treaty, the anti-ballistic missile treaty, set up a regime that was verifiable and enforceable, a regime that the two big powers in the world at the time, the Soviet Union and the United States, agreed to, that could have been expanded. And it said, you don't want to do this because you're creating for yourself an order of magnitude or two increase in cost for so little gain. And that was the biggest technical argument. And the reason that a lot of people agreed to it that might not have agreed to it otherwise. Terrible thing we did when we eliminated that treaty. And of course, it started to spiral. We've gotten rid of every treaty now, including the most dangerous one of all, the INF Treaty. So we've done all this. The empire has done all of this. I mean, we had some help on occasion from others like Europe, but it's been our mistakes, one after the other, ever since Bill Clinton became president. And I don't let any president out of that accusation afterwards. Ever since then, we have made tragic mistakes. And we're paying for them. And we're going to pay more dearly for them, I'm afraid.
Larry, Bloomberg reported that Saudi Arabia is holding indirect talks with Yemenis, with Houthis, and using Omani mediators. It says that they're preparing military options if diplomacy fails. What sort of military options do they have on the part of Saudi Arabia, in your opinion?
I think they've already shown they don't have any. I think against the Houthis, I think they've already demonstrated in how long was that war? I mean, I used to know all the details because I was working in Congress on it, but maybe 15 years the Saudis have been trying. 12 years. Yeah, been trying with our help. Intelligence, bombs, F-15s, extended range F-15s. We gave them everything but the kitchen sink. The only thing we didn't do was put troops on the ground. At least I don't think we did. At one point in time, I thought we did have advisors on the ground. Probably did, really. And they couldn't beat them. So what makes them think they're going to beat them now when they're much more beleaguered than they were then? And they don't necessarily have the United States at their side with all these JDAMs and all this intelligence and everything, because we're busy elsewhere. Oh, we're busy in Iran. I just don't see how the MBS has not become, since he was essentially their Minister of Defense and started this, he's not become some Karl von Clausewitz. I just don't think he's going to be able to do it. So the best thing they could do is what they're doing with the Omanis, providing good offices, is diplomacy. But if I were the Houthis, they sort of have the upper hand right now. in more ways than one. I'm not sure I would surrender that upper hand unless I was going to get some promises out of MBS and the Saudis in general that I could trust. And I'm not sure the Houthis will ever trust the Saudis.
I don't think, Larry, it seems that Donald Trump is sending messages to Iran, but on the Iranian side, they're talking. Today I talked with Marandi, Professor Marandi. He said that if something happens, it's going to be MOU plus. What does that mean? The plus means Yemen. The plus means Gaza and the West Bank, Palestine. And this is what's going on in the mind of Iranians. I don't see that happening with Donald Trump.
Nor I. But, you know, stranger things have happened when American presidents get desperate. The problem with desperation, or even a facsimile of desperation, I'm not sure Trump knows how to feel desperation. With some presidents, it might have a chance of operating at least on his cognitive faculties. With Donald Trump, I don't think he has any cognitive faculties for this complex type of situation. So who is going to help him do this? You look around the sycophants that and now we're going to have another sycophant apparently with Todd Blanche, his lawyer, or we already got him, I mean, in effect. And I can't see anyone offering him advice that he would listen to and maybe adhere to, first. And second, I don't see anything that he can do given the situation he's put himself in, except surrender. I mean, it'll look like surrender. He had the closest thing to that sort of thing that was masked, as it were, in the MOU. I mean, that was a surrender. That document was a surrender, but he had it masked over a little bit. And he might have been able, with his braggadocio and his lies, to mask it enough, at least with his base, to where he would not have done irreparable damage to the Republicans' chance, which he is doing now. He is doing now of winning in the midterms. So he discarded that. He did away with it. I'm assuming on the advice of who? Maybe Bibi Netanyahu. So I don't think the Iranians are going to go back there again. They might go back there if it were gold-plated. They might go back there if they had, and the Omanis too, had absolute assurances that the two channels would be Omani and Iranian, and the strait would be operated in accordance with their wishes and such. I don't know, but I think he's lost the opportunity to have a failure that he could mask politically. This failure that's coming isn't going to be maskable. It's going to be seen as what it is, I think. Maybe some of the MAGA hardcore won't see it that way, but most Americans will see it that way. And we're already looking at the lowest polls, I think, in the history of polling in terms of disapproval ratings of Donald Trump. I don't know any way he's going to resurrect himself. He'll always have that core out there that loves bullies, that loves Donald Trump, that worships Donald Trump, the Laura Loomer types out in the wider audience. But I think he's losing it. I do think he's losing it politically. Not that the Republicans won't figure out a number of ways to cheat or whatever. Not that ICE might not be deployed to intimidate voters, and even worse. But I think he's lost. I think he's lost, and increasingly even he is going to have to recognize that. So now's the time when you're not completely beaten to effect some kind of an end to this war. But do I believe he'll do it? Not on your life.
Israel is so much disappointed with Donald Trump's last decision about canceling the attack on Iran.
Yeah.
It seems to me that
saved their life, probably. It probably saved their life as the defense, as Katz was trying to tell Netanyahu.
That's so strange, Larry, to me. That's so strange because they said Smotrich said recently that he's fine with the war going on between Iran and the United States, and they're doing nothing, just sitting aside and looking at what's going on. And right now they're disappointed with the war because they're supposed to be, with the United States in that attack on Iran. Unless they were just tricking us. They're not.
You think?
They're not going to be part of that. It's going to be again between Iran and the United States. They're going to be sitting aside and just watching.
Yeah. They think, I think, some of them anyway, think that if that were the case, Iran would not unleash its fury on Israel again. I'm not sure that's the case. I'm not sure Iran won't see through that ploy and unleash its fury on Israel again. And I think that's the end for Israel. As a functioning Jewish state, I think that's the end for Israel. I was looking at the figures yesterday. I don't know if I can trust this, because some of the figures come from Israel and some of the figures come from, it's an international organization that tracks airplane flights and things like that. Immigration with an E and an I. And I was looking at the numbers of Israelis who have left, Israeli Jews, and the number of Israeli Jews who are important who have left: doctors, lawyers, corporate chieftains, defense industry executives, and things like that. And you think, okay, well, they got the money. They can buy the planes, they can get out and so forth. And then I was looking at another analysis. Do you think they will come back? When the hostilities are calmed down a little bit. And that was mostly opinion, but it was some pretty astute people expressing their opinions. And the overriding opinion was no. Do you think they'll come back in a year? Do you think they'll come back in 2 years? No. Well, what is that doing to the safe haven that everyone said this place in Palestine for Jews was supposed to be? It ain't no safe haven. And its future is war and more war. And people like Bibi Netanyahu and Naftali Bennett and probably Eisenkot and maybe even others think that's good, because they're going to win all those wars and they're going to take territory and they're going to have more Lebensraum. I got news for them. The region is not going to permit that, I don't think. And so this experiment is going to come to a halt. And Iran may get credit for being that state in the region that put a halt to it.
The reason that Donald Trump, to my understanding, canceled the attack is the Strait of Hormuz. After all, the main goal is the Strait of Hormuz. It's all about what's going on there. And so it seems to me that
in the nuclear program. The nuclear program. We can't forget the nuclear program. I'd like to forget it because I think they already have a bomb. But
yeah, the nuclear program. But the immediate, objective, or the primary objective, is the Strait of Hormuz. Then
yes, it's the one that bringing the most pee on the world, and promises to do even more.
Then how a new attack on Iran would help him? That was the main reason for him to cancel the attack. But is Israel concerned about any of these issues that are somehow important for the United States, for the region? Or Israel just sees its own objective? It doesn't care about the partnership, because they say whenever Benjamin Netanyahu talks about the relationship between the United States and Israel, it's all about, we are good partners, we are doing great, and they're doing for us, we're doing for them. And is that happening?
Bibi Netanyahu would discard the United States and take another super daddy in a heartbeat if he thought it was advantageous to do so. That's why I think, fundamentally, many reasons for it, but fundamentally, that's why I think Israel is a strategic liability, not a strategic asset, because they are untrustworthy. Now, you could say almost any ally you would have in the world, from Germany to Japan, would at some point in time be judged untrustworthy within the relationship. But I would judge Israel untrustworthy 100% of the time because they're always out for themselves. That's just my feeling. It's just the way I look at it since 1948. That's the way I think it's developed. They are a liability, not an asset. I don't know what they're thinking right now because I don't know who's doing their thinking. I think increasingly it's not Netanyahu. And by that, I mean the thinking that generates plans, actions for the future. It's not Netanyahu. It is increasingly the group in Israel that supports Netanyahu while he's still in power, but wants him gone. And that's a group within Likud and a group within what I would call the parties that move in and out of Likud. And I don't know what's going to develop with Netanyahu's departure other than worsening of the present circumstances. So as long as that's the future for this Jewish state, if it isn't destroyed by Iran, then it's going to become more and more a strategic liability for the empire. And sooner or later, that leadership in Israel that evolves from Netanyahu is going to have to find another sugar daddy or another arrangement. Will it be with China? Will it be with Russia? Will it be with will it be with Iran? Will it be in some other direction that we can't even envision right now? I don't know. Or will it just disappear? I subscribe to the theory that it's just going to disappear unless it figures out a way to become a genuine democracy, accepts all citizens within that genuine democracy, has no vestige of apartheid left, and accepts the fact that eventually, unless it is incredibly productive itself, it's going to succumb to a majority of Arabs in its midst. I mean, that's just reality. Will that ever happen? I don't know. It could, but not with this leadership. This leadership probably has to be expunged. In fact, I was reading a piece the other day. The author said Zionism in and of itself, certainly the kind of Zionism we're seeing espoused by Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, Netanyahu from time to time, and others, has to be destroyed. It has to be gotten rid of in order for any kind of state with Jews largely, or even a minority, but a large minority living in it, in that region. It has to be expunged. It has to be gotten rid of. It has to be, one person put it this way, it has to be taken out and shot in the desert and buried. It has to be. Otherwise, there's no future. There's just constant war. I think that's right. And as I said before, as I hinted at, maybe Iran is going to be indirectly, if not directly, the instrument of this metamorphosis, this change of this very poisonous state at the eastern end of the Mediterranean. That would be a positive development. It would probably take some time, probably take a lot of shifting of the relationships in the region. And it's going to take, I think, what is happening right now at Iran's behest, departure from the region by the empire.
Hezbollah Secretary General, he said that there is no obstacle to a meeting between Hezbollah and the Syrian leadership, and such a meeting will take place at the appropriate time based on the assessment and mutual agreement of both sides. This is I think, an important statement on their part, because we know, the way that Hezbollah was helping Assad and Bashar Assad, and right now they're shifting, they're moving away from that position because of the new reality in Syria. And the reality in Syria is somehow, would you say, Larry, that Turkey would support that, the talks between the two?
Well, this is terrorists talking to terrorists, right?
Yeah.
If you take our connotation of Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda and whence he came, this is terrorists talking to terrorists. That's not to denigrate it necessarily. It's not to say it couldn't be productive. But I got to believe that Erdogan probably looks at it that way and is somewhat concerned about what might occur as a result of that conversation. Frankly, I don't think anything will occur, but there's a possibility. And that possibility has got to be accepted by Erdogan, or it doesn't have any future. It doesn't have any blooming, if you will. So I continue. I agree with Colonel McGregor, for example, when he says Turkey is the key to that region in many respects, and it just hasn't shown that it knows how to stick the key in the door and unlock it yet. But it is. So that could be positive if Turkey accepts it and helps it along, if you will. And the ultimate aim of both is a sound and reasonably safe Syria, a sound and reasonably safe Lebanon, and neither threatening Turkey. I mean, but how do you do that with, unless my prophecy comes true, Israel in there mucking it up all the time? Because Israel wants Syria. There's no question in my mind Israel wants Syria. And I think they want all of it. And they want all of Jordan. So as long as you got that kind of aggrandizement motivation in the region, it's hard to think about people around it having any peace either.
Yeah. It means that the United States should prepare itself for the ongoing and endless wars there.
Yeah, and that's what Israel is a recipe for. It is. Look at 1948 on. When have they not been at war, really? I mean, it's not a safe haven. It's not what it was promised to be. It's anything but a safe haven. I mean, if you like war, if you like living under constant threat, if you like being attacked or having your government attacked more often than not, all the time in order to keep you in your Coca-Cola and your blinnies, fine, but that's not my idea of a successful state.
Yeah. I assume, Larry, let's put it this way. If, let's assume Benjamin Netanyahu, there is a chance of having Benjamin Netanyahu being removed from his position in Israel. If that happens, and how do you see the foreign policy of Israel or their leverage on the United States being somehow influencing their strategy of endless wars in the West Asia?
Well, this may sound strange, but I think the relationship could improve, actually. Maybe not as long as Donald Trump is the president, but he's not going to be the president much longer. God help us if he is. It might improve, but I don't see anyone with the political oomph around Netanyahu or potentially replacing Netanyahu that is going to bring this kind of refreshing common sense to bear on the more or less almost theocratic regime. And as long as that's the case, I don't know where you find anyone. Others would say when Rabin was assassinated, so was the peace movement in Israel. So was the not necessarily the peace movement in terms of real effect, but the people who were interested in a solution that accommodated the Palestinians and the Jews. They're gone. They're completely gone. They're wiped out. So I don't know. I don't know where you find that kind of chemistry, that kind of ingredient to revive that aspect of Israel and then make it flourish. There are those who would say Rabin wasn't really any better than any of the others. He just masked it better. I'm not one of those. I didn't know him personally, but I do know some people who did know him personally. And I think he was a different kind of individual. And I think that's the reason Netanyahu engineered his assassination, because I'm quite confident Netanyahu knew what he was doing in those political rallies, and he knew a settler was going to come out and shoot Rabin sooner or later because he was orchestrating the circumstances for it to happen. And he sort of killed any possibility Israel had of accommodating reasonably well the Palestinians and having a real democracy that had Jews in it in preponderance, if not majority, in the Levant. He killed that. He killed that. And he knew damn well he was killing it when he assassinated Rabin. And he went about everything he did after that, consolidating that victory. Getting rid of that now is going to be extremely difficult. Mm-hmm. But Iran might do it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure.
We went all over the place, didn't we?
Exactly. Exactly.
Let me know if you hear anything more about these guys telling Bradley Cooper what he should do.
Yeah.
That's fascinating for me as an old military hand. You know, I had many occasions I wanted to walk into the general or the admiral and say, "Let me tell you what you should do." I did on one or two occasions, and one occasion I got told, "Go away." Another occasion they adopted my idea, but I mean, I was a little bit. I like to think I was pretty influential at that particular time as a colonel, but you never know. But you know, okay, everybody come together. We're going to talk about what we're going to do to beat Iran.
Yeah.
Okay, Bradley, let's go.
Yeah.
Shocking.
It's shocking. It was shocking. When I read this, I was shocked.
You are that desperate. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Larry.
You take care of yourself.
And see you soon. Take care.
See you Friday.
See you Friday. Exactly.
Yeah. That's my last time for a while, I think.
Yeah.
Take care.
Take care.